Step up your Photoshop animation with effects and AI-generated images. Bring those AI-generated images to life with Photoshop. Don't forget to like and subscribe. In this tutorial, you're going to learn all about adding effects to layers, generating images with Adobe Generate, and how to modify those images and without having to redo your animation, and some special techniques to create realistic looking images and animations. So I was looking at this image and thinking, this kind of reminds me of a futuristic space door. And so the first thing I did was I created these pieces of the door. Then once you're done with that, you have to make it into a smart object. So you right click on the layer and you convert to smart object. And what that does is it makes it easier for you to animate in Photoshop. Another thing that's great about using generative images is, let's say we wanted to come up with a different door. We can go in here and it remembers the prompt that we used. And let's say we wanted to use this one. You hit save, you go back to your image, and there it is. Now you do that for each one, and it remembers that you duplicated the original image. And so you do that to each one and you've gotten this new image. And it's pretty easy to do, and you don't have to redo your animations. So now that you've got all of your masked objects in Photoshop, you want to open up each one and create a base keyframe. And then you move out to where you want your animation to end. So for this one, we have it out here. We're moving it from the center to the top right. So once you get out to the keyframe, all you do is you select it and move it, and that's it. So we've got this one. So basically you're going to do the same thing to these other doors because they're all going to move out. So underneath each of these, I have a colorful outer space background, which I also got from Generate. I asked it for a colorful landscape. You can give it some options if you want to select the style of image that you want. We're going to start off with a base keyframe again. Here it is. And then at the very end of the animation, we're going to add another one. So what you're going to do at this last keyframe is enlarge the image and move it. So you can see here I enlarged it quite a bit and moved it so it's moving a little bit toward the right hand side of the image. So when it starts, it's small and it gets larger. Next thing we're going to animate is the rocket ship. So it's going to come in and move across the screen. So we're transforming where the ship is, the size of the ship, we're warping the ship, and we're adding this shadow. So I wanted to create a shadow that looked realistic, so that moved with the ship. And so the way that you do that is you create a style keyframe. This drop shadow actually animates from being further away from the object to being close to the object at the very end. So you'll see here in this drop shadow, I have the distance at 1000 pixels. At the very end, I have the drop shadow at 232 pixels. So it's much closer to the ship. And that way, it has this really cool effect of looking like the shadow is correctly animating with the ship. Now, one thing I added here was a keyframe, another transform keyframe, because I actually took the ship image and with the command key I held down on the corners and kind of warped the ship to make it look like it was kind of rotating. And then at the end you'll see it just kind of gives it a very small amount of rotation and makes it look more realistic. The next thing I did was add the doors in at the end. So to start with, I had to go to the second keyframe of the doors where they animate out. For this second keyframe, you want to select hold interpolation. And what that does is it makes sure that there's no animation between this one and the next keyframe where I want the door to start coming back in, because I want it in the same place. And so I go out to the keyframe that I want it to go from, and I hit transform again, another transform keyframe. And then I go to the end and I hit another transform keyframe. Now for this one, I'm going to copy the very first keyframe and I hit paste over the keyframe I just made. And what that does is it just creates a keyframe that's exactly like the original keyframe. So that way when we loop, it has it in the exact same place. The last item here that we can use to animate on the timeline for smart objects. So it's opacity. So let's say we wanted this spaceship to fade out on the way out. You hit opacity to get your base keyframe. You go out to your end keyframe and you go up to your layer style and hit opacity and hit 0. This way it's going to animate out. You can see it fading out all the way out. So one of the other things to note is that under this settings button you can hit loop playback, and that's really helpful when you're trying to figure out your animations. You can also trim wherever your playhead is. So let's say we wanted to trim here. The other thing you can choose is you can drag to apply any of these options, which are fading, crossfade, fade with white, black, or color. Basically some other animate options that are available to you. Another tip when you're generating images in Photoshop is to keep the name of the layer that it comes up with, because it's exactly the same as the prompt that you use. Thing is, you can add audio to your video. So there's an audio track. So you go and grab your audio file and you'll see it's down here underneath your video animations. So when you export out your video, you'll have this background music. If you want to have another track on top of that, you can add another audio track. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial of advanced animation in Photoshop.